Hello and welcome to the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I am glad, and today my guest is R.L. Bryer, who also calls himself the Pittsburgh HODLr. And he says that he has been in the Bitcoin space since 2009 and joined Litecoin among the first maybe 100 people in 2011. And he also went to university and did studies in Austrian economics and has worked for Ron Paul's campaign. And that's a lot to talk about, given the fact that this podcast is mostly about Bitcoin and its qualities to take over the world as sound money. So, hello, Mr. Bryer.
How you doing, Vlad? Thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm happy that we get to talk about Austrian economics for once, and I have somebody who has quite an experience in it.
Yeah, I'm sort of an Austrian economics nerd, so it's what I like to do when I have leisure time, which lately I don't, but when I do, I like to put on a good Rothbard or Hoppe lecture, or try to read a little bit if I have a little more time even.
So how did you get into it? Was it overnight that you realized that the world economy is not really working, or did somebody influence you?
Yeah, I was at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, and I was studying English literature. And a lot of my time when I wasn't doing school and just hanging out with my friends at that point, you're in college, was spent on looking at the political climate and trying to figure out the world. I've always been kind of an inquisitive person. So I found Ron Paul in the middle of all these wars that we were in. We were pretty deep in the war, into the wars by then in 2009. And I started getting into him. I heard of some of his debates from the prior election cycle in 2008 when he ran, and I heard he was running again. So I was just getting more and more into Ron Paul, and he started dropping these really great pieces of knowledge on people. Whenever he had the opportunity, he would talk about the Austrian School of Economics, Murray Rothbard, and all those guys. And I was like, all right, one day after all this started to click, that he was right, that non-aggression principle and all these things were the way to go. Sound money, free markets, gold, all that stuff. I started looking into the Austrian school. What is this school of economics? Who are the proponents? Who are the masters of this school? And I started reading, and I picked up Man, Economy, and State by Murray Rothbard, Man, Economy, and State with Power and Market. And I realized that this is like the most important book I've ever touched. So that really led me down the rabbit hole into the Austrian school. And at the same time, I was learning about Bitcoin and the importance of blockchain, and the two kind of culminated there.
That's impressive. So, as you may know by now, there are some people who claim that Ron Paul might just be Satoshi Nakamoto. It's an inside joke because he has showed a lot of support for the idea of Bitcoin. Obviously, he has no idea how it works and has no background in cryptography or computer science, but he's a very smart individual, and many of the ideas of having a deflationary supply and having a predictive monetary policy are actually ideas that he has presented throughout the years and he stands for.
Yeah, Ron Paul, he's a brilliant man. One of his sayings is even if our words or our philosophies and our actions and stuff, even if they fall on deaf ears, they can never really unhear what they've heard. So I guess it wouldn't be deaf ears, but they can never unhear what we've said. So he was a great, he still is a great educator now. He has his homeschool program, and I actually I started at the same time. Like I said, I got into Bitcoin, and I got into the Ron Paul movement, Liberty movement, at the same time. And I actually worked a little bit for the Ron Paul campaign, making phone calls and going to meetups and stuff here in the United States, trying to spread these messages, the message of liberty as far as possible. I was successful in getting a few friends to get on board with me, and we would go and make phone calls on his behalf and try to spread the libertarian message and the anarcho-capitalism was my message after I learned the importance of the Austrian school.
And how did that work?
What do you mean exactly?
By, when you went door to door to talk to people and try to persuade them into embracing these ideas of anarcho-capitalism, when I guess there is a rising wave among our generation of, I guess we both are millennials, and there's this tendency to want for more government intervention in markets. And I guess our generation is more trusting in relation to the government than our parents were.
Yeah, okay, I understand where you're coming from now. Sorry about that. I would say that it was a mixed pot, or mixed lot. Some people were very receptive, and they thought I was right, and the others really hated me. They weren't on board with anti-state, owning your own body, self-reliance, a lot of stuff that came out of Henry David Thoreau and stuff all the way back there, to that era. Like I said, I was an English literature major in school, and that was the first time that a lot of these things actually clicked for me, reading stuff like that. And a lot of people I don't think they have the inclination to do their own research. Not everyone is an autodidact like you and me, or you and I, and if you're not a self-learner and you don't put in the hours, I can see how it's so easy to be manipulated by, you go to a public school, you listen to the news, and the news is basically just a mouthpiece for the state. So it's hard to break away from their ideologies if it's all you really ever hear, and all the people that are supposed to be authority figures in society are on board with state policies.
Do you think that you can be a Bitcoiner even if you're not a libertarian, or that socialists more precisely can be Bitcoiners?
I think they have already become, some of them have already become Bitcoiners by necessity. As in Venezuela and stuff, I'm sure that a lot of people have started learning the importance of sound money there, and I'm sure at one point they probably were more of a socialist themselves. But in the United States, where we have it a little bit better still, even though our economy is fake here. I think we're seeing more people come into Bitcoin that lean towards centralized statism, and it's interesting to me. They're not a true Bitcoiner to me, but they're going to come into the space by necessity. So it's funny that you asked that. That's a really good question. It's like, the anarcho-capitalist and Austrian school guys, we created this space. Not that I am Satoshi or anything like that, but we helped push it to the masses, and we've really helped push adoption. And now we're seeing people that aren't Austrians and aren't proponents of liberty come in by basically virtue of necessity and in hopes of striking it rich, I guess, in some form.
Yeah, but I think that's great because it just proves that the invention is useful and provides real value that anyone can find regardless of their background or of their biases or personal beliefs.
I totally agree with you. I'm not against them coming in. I think that we want to onboard everyone that is interested and show them the ways of freedom, and that's what Bitcoin really symbolizes to me is freedom. So yeah, the more the merrier, and the better for everyone who's been in longer. So I'm not against anyone coming in. I don't want to come across like that, but it's just funny that the same people that were ridiculing the early adopters, the very early adopters, are the same people that now are sending me messages and asking me how I get in. How do I get into Bitcoin?
That's how it always is, I guess. You have people who don't believe in anything and they're skeptics. I mean, even Adam Back, who is the CEO of Blockstream right now, and he is the one who developed proof of work. He was a skeptic of Bitcoin, and it wasn't until Bitcoin reached the $1,000 threshold that he started to believe in Satoshi's invention and said, okay, this is it. This is our chance to actually provide something of value, and it looks like a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for us. So I guess even some of the most brilliant people, even Tim May was a cypherpunk and provided inspiration to people like Nick Szabo and Hal Finney, who even if they were not Satoshi, have laid the foundations for Satoshi to emerge to create something like Bitcoin. And Tim May was not into Bitcoin and thought that it's too, how should I put it? There was this interview of him where he said that it's too much about economics and not about being a cypherpunk, and he's much more concerned about privacy and providing liberty to people. And in the case of Bitcoin, it got into the hands of big exchanges and greedy actors that have turned it into something regulated, something for which you have to sign up with your ID and provide your address and your phone number and social security number and everything. So it's not as cypherpunk anymore. And I guess many of these people who are concerned about privacy can be critical about what Bitcoin is right now and what it was meant to be.
I totally understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, that just seems to be the natural inclination or natural, just the way things go sometimes, and especially technology. I still feel that it's the best money for everyone in the world. But obviously, since the beginning, it has lost a little bit of the decentralized nature of it. And that's why I still think it's important. People, if you can do, peer-to-peer meetups, if it's possible, or however, just doing exchanges voluntarily outside of KYC, know your customer, and all that stuff. It's definitely still possible. It's not as easily done today, but as we've seen, the market always has an answer for that, and that's where we're getting some of the privacy points too. So if you're worried about anonymity, you can always head over to one of the more private blockchains.
You are from Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. So what is the Bitcoin landscape like? Do you have a big community of people that you can meet and talk to and maybe trade some Bitcoins? Like they give you $3,000 and you sell them one Bitcoin, or is it obscure and hard to find?
Pittsburgh's a pretty big city, so there's definitely that opportunity. There's also Bitcoin ATMs that are starting to show up places. More and more of those are popping up all over the country here in the United States. So yeah, that's still a possibility. And if you're really worried about it, New York and stuff is not too far from me. So if I wanted to really do a big big business like that, you could definitely head to New York City. And I'm sure you'd have a host of people that would be ready to take your bitcoins for some dirty fiat.
Yeah, you're gonna meet people like the Winklevoss twins of Gemini who are trying to provide regulation and say that this revolution needs rules. And they
Yeah,
advertise that all over New York in public transportation.
yeah, those billboards they put up in New York City are a disgrace, in my opinion. I'm not. I don't really have anything against those two individually on a personal level, but I don't. I'm not a big fan of what they've done, and I just don't. I don't agree with all. But you know, in the same right, like we just said, for adoption to hit critical, you know, peak adoption to happen. Some of these things, unfortunately, some of the regulations and stuff kind of have to happen to get some of the, you know, big institutional money and get it listed on some of these, you know, things that we want to see it listed on. So it's sort of one of those things that it is what it is. And like I said, if you don't like it, you can always head to like the free market always has an answer. So you can head to another blockchain and maybe one that isn't as well known yet, maybe, you know, and have some influence there and take your money there if you take your fiat there and get into that cryptocurrency if you're not as interested in Bitcoin anymore.
I think the reason why I call this show the Bitcoin Takeover and I decided to focus only on Bitcoin is that this is the only project of which I'm certain that we will still be having 5 years, 10 years from now. Everything else can just go away tomorrow. But Bitcoin is decentralized enough to survive this kind of contentious attack, and the incentive is still high to participate in the system. So I guess it will still be around for a long time, while others will just fade as the free market pushes them down and the demand for them decreases during bear markets.
Yeah, that's I agree with you. There's a couple that I think will be around. I view Litecoin and Ethereum there, but definitely, really Litecoin's been here almost as long as Bitcoin now, so I don't see it going anywhere. But as far as withstanding, if you had to place a cryptocurrency bet, if you wanted to put some satoshis on the line, I would say that you're right there. In the next decade, I think it'll be interesting to look back and see what's still around. And I definitely think Bitcoin will still be here. It withstood numerous attacks from, you know, from hackers to politicians to CEOs of banks to what, you know, just overall the amount of attacks it's withstood and just keeps on ticking now, like you said, for 10 years. So it seems to be, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but almost indestructible. I think the only people that could really destroy it are the people that are still developing the software.
Yeah, I think if the developers got greedy or decided to implement some kind of code which inflates the supply, what they call an inflation bug, then that would be the end of it, because the value proposition right now is that you know when you buy it that there will never be more than 21 million. And that's the only kind of guarantee that you have. That's the only part that you trust. But if people either inflate the supply to a bug or run some kind of propaganda against Bitcoin and say that miners need greater rewards and we should inflate the supply so that they get the incentive to continue to run their operations, then it's likely that we are going to see that kind of fork which increases the rewards for the miners and removes the halvings, which were part of the Nakamoto consensus, as we call it. So it's always a fight that we are having every day to be able to preserve the integrity of the monetary model that Satoshi has left us. And Bitcoin has no PR department, has no official defenders. So we have to be constantly aware that in order for this dream to come true, we have to be its guardians.
Yeah, as you just illustrated very well, we are the guardians, and this is I've met so many great people in this space, and I just have so much confidence that it'll persist. Like you said, you were talking about the inflation and how that could really be the thing that would do us in if they created some sort of inflation bug. And I'm reminded of the Voltaire quote that all paper money goes back to its natural or intrinsic value. I don't like the word intrinsic, but natural value of zero. So that it really inflation is a cancer, and that would be the that would be the thing that could really kill it off. But I don't foresee anyone letting that happen.
Yeah, I guess right now there's too much money into it. And if you look at the developments that we have had in recent years, from the Blackstream satellite, which broadcasts the blockchain from space, and all the way to big institutions getting into Bitcoin and opening trading desks, that's a sign that this invention is interesting. And above everything, it can prove to be useful to leverage against the governments, to have this kind of hedge against their decisions. And no matter what, you know that your possessions are not going to be confiscated, not taken away by the arbitrary people who are in power and decide to start a new war or do something that you may not agree with. And the reason why I'm into this is that I like to think that we are being put into a position where those in power no longer collect from us by default taxes. And if they want to get anything, they come and negotiate. And that's a revolution in itself, because since taxes were invented, there was no way for you to protect yourself against the tax man. It's always like we developed this expression that you can never get away from death and taxes. And I agree. I like the idea of paying taxes if they are useful. I like the idea of paying for education, for healthcare, but I don't want to pay for pensions of, we have this issue in Romania with retired army generals who never fought in a war, but they get like $10,000 a month just for being there, and there are thousands of them. So basically millions of dollars are being spent every month on their pensions, which is outrageous, as you have the child support, which every child who goes to school gets. I'm not sure what you call that in the United States, but it's like a sum of money that you get just for being an underage student. And it's meant to help the parents buy food or whatever, take care of the child. And that one is about $30, $40, and that's really nothing. So
yeah, go ahead.
My relationship with the tax man is that I want him or her or it to be more accountable. I'm not asking for much, just to be honest and open and say, okay, this is your money, you're giving it to me, and I'm going to provide these services, as opposed to do whatever the hell I want because you have no control.
Yeah, that's really the beauty of voluntary money too, is that we're creating an environment of a real free market where we decide how much we pay for a transaction. We decide which blockchain we want to get into, which cryptocurrency we're gonna stake, put our wealth into. And we're not on board with just being told what to do anymore. We're not just going to sit back and be expropriated by the state. There's a lot of smart people, and now we have the ability with the internet and decentralized blockchains to take the power back, literally. Why would we let these states around the world steal our purchasing power in perpetuity? It's just not going to happen. So that's another reason that they're going to try to get on board and co-opt with their own currencies and take Bitcoin for taxes and stuff like that. And the funny thing is, you mentioned that how there's welfare programs and all that stuff. They call it something different everywhere else, but the best sort of charity is voluntary charity as well. So no one feels good about being forced to give up part of their income. So you'll also note that the biggest contributions in charity are voluntary. So it's just funny that the way they paint individuals out as that they have to be forced to be charitable is just laughable and just really a disgrace. People that have a lot of wealth are generally very charitable and want the best for their community. So I'm not on board with somebody holding a gun in my face or my friends' faces around the world and saying, give me your money or you're going in this cage. We're not doing that anymore. That's not going to be the way the future works, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, and I like the idea that we as a society are evolving to that point where we can negotiate and we can talk. I guess in the future we are going to be so much more educated and understanding that we might not need the governments anymore for these purposes. We might even rebuild our communities and realize how we can work it out by ourselves. But at this stage, it seems very unlikely. And I remember in university that I read a book which is called Bowling Alone. Was it Robert D. Putnam who wrote it? Let me check. But it's very relevant, and I'm going to tell you why.
Okay.
Bowling Alone. Yeah, it's by Robert D. Putnam. At the time when it was released, I think Bill Clinton praised it, and Bill Clinton was US president at the time. And he said that he has learned more about American politics from that book than he has learned from his presidency. But nevertheless, it starts from the idea that Putnam was bowling at the alley, and he realized that nobody was really talking to each other anymore, and they were all staring at the screens that they were having with news anchors who are presenting the latest events with the scores and stuff like that. And he took it on to demonstrating how television in the United States and the spread of cable television and satellite has actually killed off communities. As before this, you would have people getting together on Sundays at church or something like that and discussing their issues and deciding where they should be putting their money to solve problems. But as soon as they had television, they started to stay in their houses and spend much more time in there, become more isolated, and watch the news and polarize their opinions according to the channels that they were watching. And after that happened, it influenced them to the extent that if they knew that their neighbor was voting for another party, then they would not engage as much, even though they had a common interest and they could work together and they were good friends. It was not like that anymore. They were taught basically to hate each other and not collaborate and neglect whatever ideological differences they were having. And the society that we have right now, I guess, is built on these premises that some people watch CNN, other people watch Fox News, and they don't really talk to each other. And that's tragic.
Yeah, I understand that thesis. That's definitely true in a lot of ways. I think that this is, with decentralization and stuff at our fingertips now, some of those problems can be solved. It's sort of interesting. The way you put that is really interesting. I'm sitting here processing that, but they say familiarity breeds contempt. So maybe this is just like us, and like I'm here in the U.S. or in Romania. Maybe this is why the internet and the power that we've been given through blockchains and coming together with our important ideas is like finally taking root or whatever. It's like finally blooming. And yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. This is like our great chance to just cooperate with the world. Like, I've met so many people over the world. My book's been sold in 40 countries. These are people that we barely can communicate. You know, sometimes there's a language barrier, but they're interested in freedom and we're interested in freedom. And it's just like, I think that decentralization of money will lead to decentralization of community. So this is like the first shot that we're firing now, and then we can start to dissolve centralized statism and work backwards that way, sort of. So it'll be like money, and then by freeing the markets, we can. Maybe I'm just like I'm just eternal optimist. Maybe, I don't know. But I think that a lot of things that the government does, and I learned a lot of this from the Austrian school and Hans Hoffman, is that a lot of the things and functions that government does is like is capable. It can be done by like private contracts and stuff. So voluntarily, free market alternatives to force and centralization. So we would still have like the rule of law, which is obviously the most important thing in a society to make it function. But it would be done in a more local manner, and people would be voluntarily cooperating as opposed to having to forcefully do things.
Do you believe that Bitcoin has made libertarianism more popular, or was it just a mean for libertarians to become more vocal and talk about the mean that they have acquired to present their ideas?
That's a really good question. The two work symbiotically, I think. Like a lot of people were just like sitting there waiting for this chance. I think around 2008, and then Satoshi Nakamoto released the white paper then, and it's slowly but surely caught on, and it just has some sort of draw to libertarians. Like libertarians love free markets, they love sound money, they want peace, they're sick of wars, especially here in the United States where there's been perpetual war almost my entire life. I'm 33, so it's just they work well together. You know, libertarianism and Bitcoin and anarcho-capitalism and the whole thing. They just all come together. It seems like, and it's funny. You know, it just seems like people that are into one or the other sort of. There's an overlap. I'm not saying it's everyone that's into Bitcoin is a libertarian. Everyone that's libertarian is into Bitcoin, but there's definitely a high percentage.
I think Bitcoin is a very nice proof of concept for the ideas that have existed for a long time, but it's the best and most effective implementation that we have had up to this point. And my view on it is that people are going to discover the Austrian School of Economics thanks to it, as maybe at first it's about financial speculation, and people see the news and say, okay, this went up in price like 4 or 5 times in a few months. So I have to buy this. I have to get into this, and maybe they'll get rich. And maybe most likely they will not. But once they get in, they have the chance to interact with the community. I guess that happens when you see that the price is going down and your plan is not really working. You're trying to figure out what's going on and why the price is not going up. So you start learning and you fall down the rabbit hole. And
yeah, that's sort of like our advantage as anarcho-capitalist Austrian school libertarian, Austro-libertarian guys, is that we were here first, so we can teach and educate about the importance of sound money along the way. Like in my content and in my book, I definitely talk a lot about Austrian economics and the importance of understanding, voluntary exchange and stuff, and how when two people go into an exchange, they do it, and if they do it voluntarily, the reason that they do it is because both sides become better off after the exchange. One person needs one thing, the other needs the other, so they do it voluntarily, and that's how we know human welfare has benefited from that exchange. So just understanding very simple, it's such a simplistic idea that we aren't taught in schools these days, that is of the utmost importance, I think.
Yeah, but how popular is it to study Austrian economics in the United States?
It's actually, there's like a niche group now. It's become pretty popular since Ron Paul really did a great job of getting it out there to people. And then I think it's definitely thriving right now. Now, I'm not going to tell you that the 1 out of 10 people can explain the Austrian theory, ACU, or anything like that, but there's definitely more people than I don't know, in the last 100 years maybe they could do it, or at least the better half of a century. So I think that economic education is on the rise.
Do you also support the Libertarian Party in the United States?
I support a lot of the libertarian ideas. I'm not political. I'm an anarcho-capitalist, so I've completely withdrawn from politics. So Ron Paul led me to the Austrian school that led me to the ideas of anarcho-capitalism, and I don't support statism at all. So I can't, in good conscience, support politics.
Yeah, I was about to ask you about what you think of John McAfee and his attempt to become the nominee of the Libertarian Party. And do you think that he's a good influence or a good voice for the libertarians in the United States?
John McAfee's an interesting fella. Is he good for libertarianism? Yeah, I would say he is, because all the things that he's talking about are pretty much fundamental ideas of libertarian philosophy. So yeah, I would say he's a good mouthpiece. He has a huge following, and his bid for presidency, or his run for the presidency, he's even said, I'm not sure if you've seen this, he knows he has no shot. He's using his he's over 70 years old now. I think he's about the same age as I think he's 73 years old. So he's using his political, or his popularity on social media and his past accomplishments in the free market to help spread the ideals of liberty, which I'm obviously a proponent of. So I think it's all good. It's all good in that he's doing that. I think that's definitely a good thing. He has no shot of winning, and he's come out and said that himself. So he's using his clout to definitely spread the ideals of liberty.
Personally, I'm not a fan, and I don't really like him because he gives Bitcoin a bad name, and he had no shame in promoting all sorts of shady projects in 2017. And he even had that program which was called Altcoin of the Week or something. He's made a lot of money from that. And he has made that famous bet that if Bitcoin doesn't reach $100,000 by the end of 2020 or something, he's going to eat his own dick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to separate the two, like the man and his ideals, I guess. So I was just talking about his libertarian nature, but I'm not an advocate of shilling coins, per se. So yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of what he was doing with that altcoin of the week or anything like that. But then again, everybody has as long as they're not, this is like more of the libertarian aspect or voluntary aspect. As long as they're not hurting me personally, I think people should pretty much be allowed to do whatever they want. So yeah, it's not something I would do or participate in, but yeah, as long as he's trying to spread the philosophy of liberty for the masses, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think the problem that I have with him is that he's trying to present himself as a representative of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And he said a few times that he wants to go on stage during debates and mention cryptocurrencies and their importance. And I guess that's good somehow for exposure, but him as an ambassador for cryptocurrencies, I think that's bad. He will scare random normies away and they will not be even curious to check out. And we're going to bear as a community the stigma of having him introduce Bitcoin to some people who haven't heard of it before.
Yeah, that's sort of like one of those things that were one of the few problems that result from everyone having a platform these days, I guess, on social media and stuff. Like, you can turn certain people off to ideas if you're too over the top with them.
Anyway, we should go back and talk some more stuff about Bitcoin. You said that you have been around in 2009, 2010. You read some posts from the Bitcoin talk forums, but you didn't engage.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever have regrets about it?
No, I don't think so. It wasn't about me. This has never been about me gaining any sort of fame or anything. I enjoy trying to educate people. That's why I have always been active on social media, getting my message of freedom out since I've learned it, how to advocate for sound money and strong economic theory and stuff. So, I mean, it would have been cool to have a few of those old posts to look back on, but I definitely have my own little catalog of posts and stuff on Twitter and my old Facebook that I could get into if I wanted to.
So, if you were to introduce Bitcoin to somebody for the first time and you met them on the street, how would you do it? What is the main feature that you would emphasize on?
Generally, I seize the moment is the way I would say. I don't generally go up and do that anymore. I used to be the guy at the party that would be like just rambling about Bitcoin. You've seen the memes probably, like everyone at the party is having a good time, and you're the bowling alley meme, and you're like the bowling ball that is coming in with the Bitcoin conversation. But today, I would say if somebody's complaining about the state of things and about the market, and the United States just hit $22 trillion in debt, I always use that as an opportunity to come in and start talking about the decentralized nature and how nobody controls it and they can't inflate it away.
So these are the most important features that you identify in Bitcoin and the reasons why you got in the first place.
Absolutely, the features that were built in with scarcity, finite supply, hard to break. You can't, you can put it. They can't stop you from memorizing your wallet and stuff. You can go across the border with your entire net worth and nobody's wiser. There's no way to confiscate it because it's not centralized. All of that stuff is like super important to me. I like the idea that no one can come and say at gunpoint that you owe me or you can't leave this arbitrary border. You can't travel with that because you might leave the United States and melt those coins down, and the melt value is worth more outside of these fake lines that we've drawn on a map. That's the most important stuff to me.
Do you have any people that you look up to in the space? You previously mentioned that you're very happy to get a retweet from Nick Szabo, and you think that he's most likely Satoshi. But are there any other people who influence you and make you feel, like you belong here and you're proud to be a Bitcoiner?
Yeah, there's a few people that I've looked up. I don't know, not idols, but prominent people in the space that have definitely Nick Szabo, Hal Finney, definitely like the cypherpunks. Those guys are the reason we're here today, and we all owe them a great debt. So those guys are very important, and some of the early companies that were created, those like Roger Ver. I know Roger Ver is what's the word I'm trying to think of? A lot of people are split on Roger Ver, but he has done a lot of good for Bitcoin and the space overall. So he's another important figure that has been around since almost the beginning. I think I was actually involved in Bitcoin before Roger Ver, but also Charlie Lee. I think Charlie Lee is a good guy, the creator of Litecoin. I have a lot of faith in. I put stock in his ideas, and I trust him, even though, again, he's a human. We all have flaws. Who else? Those are the main guys I can think of off the top of my head. Those are some of the people that I think have been around the longest and are the most important. And I do think that Nick Szabo and Hal Finney and I don't know, maybe just those two. Those are the guys that I would look to as maybe being Satoshi, but I don't put a lot of importance into who it was anymore, and I respect their desires to remain anonymous.
Somehow I was expecting for you to say Roger Ver, because you guys have a lot in common with the voluntarist and libertarian mindset. Mm-hmm. So if the two of you were to get together in the same room and talk about political issues and economics, I think you'd have many points of convergence.
Yeah, I listen to Roger talk, and I feel like I'm listening to myself talk a lot. There's I think Roger's a really good guy. He gets a bad reputation for splitting into Bitcoin Cash, but as an Austrian, I think a lot of the things he says are spot on. So I view Bitcoin as the best money we have today. And as somebody who is a proponent of free markets, I understand that other monies will pop up. And that's the beauty of the free market, that the best money will win. So I don't hate Roger Ver like a lot of people. It's become like fashionable to be an anti-Roger Ver guy. And I'm not on board with that.
I think I can understand that to some extent, even though he tried to take advantage of his reputation in the game to promote his own version of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure it was him who split the community. He was one of the first people who, maybe he was the first who had a major hard fork and separated from the main chain. And then there was the plan for Segwit 2x to get released later that year. And it got canceled, and the people who were supposed to be into Segwit 2x, like Jeff Garzik, and I think Gavin Andreessen was also on board. And they started supporting Bitcoin Cash afterwards.
Yeah, Gavin's another one of the original guys too. He's done a lot for adoption and spreading that. So yeah, I don't understand. And the only thing I would say, if I have one thing to say that I don't agree with that he did, talking about Roger, but maybe I would have named it something without Bitcoin in the name, because it's a little confusing for people that get into the space. But like I said, that's his prerogative, So you can do whatever you want. Nobody owns Bitcoin. It's not a corporation. So that's where we are. We're in a decentralized thing. So let the best project win, I guess.
What was I about to say? You mentioned something about Gavin, and some idea came to my mind, and I forgot. But never mind.
Okay.
I guess at the end of the day, I'm certain at this point that Bitcoin will be the winner of this game. It's so advanced, and there are so many brilliant people working on stuff like Lightning and Schnorr signatures, and it's not just about privacy and scaling, it's also about making the chain more efficient in terms of having smaller transactions, which occupy a smaller amounts of kilobytes in the blocks. That I think that's also important if you're going to have fixed blocks that will not get bigger than 1 megabyte and can extend through their weight to 2 or 3 megabytes with SegWit, then it's important to make sure that your transactions are actually getting smaller. I think that's a brilliant approach as Bitcoin Cash. I think the best comparison when it comes to it is that it's like trying to achieve broadband internet by stacking together 56K modems.
Mm-hmm.
You have this old technology which you are scaling by increasing the amount of energy and technology which is similar that you're putting into it, while others are innovating and finding new ways for it to work.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I looked at your article the other day that you wrote about this, and I think that a lot of this stuff is going to be figured out here in the near future. The one thing that people need to remember is that first mover advantage that Bitcoin has is super important. The network it's built over those 10 years is pretty tough to stop, and I think it's important, like you said, not to get too wrapped up in just one aspect, like is it scalable, or these things can be worked out with these side chains and layers and stuff. So I have to look more into the smaller transactions and stuff like that, but I haven't decided on anything like that. I know some people think it can be harmful, but some people are proponents. It sounds like you might be a proponent of that.
Sorry, I turned off my microphone by accident. Yeah, I'm not sure if my opinions on it are influenced by some other people, because when you're not technical in the sense that you can code, and you cannot sit at the table with the developers, it's very likely that you have had your brain washed by some other people's opinions, and you probably live in a kind of bubble where the same ideas are being redistributed. And I constantly try to think of cons and bad sides of everything that I believe in, just make sure that my line of thought is still objective.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a good way to put it. As somebody else who doesn't I'm not a coder, so you have to. I think that's another aspect of the people in this community that we tend to be skeptical of things, and that works in our favor overall. We are more apt to vet people that say things. So neither one of us are probably going to sit here and say it's good or bad. That'll be something we have to look more into as time goes on and the next run happens. We'll see if any of these solutions that have been implemented over the last 18 months help with the scaling.
Yeah, and we like to say don't trust and verify, but there is no way for us to verify actually.
Until the next bull run and everyone starts buying again and trying to transact, there's really no way for us people that don't code. And really, I don't think a lot of the people that do code even know for certain what will happen with all the side chain stuff and all of the all the scaling things that have taken place, and interoperability and all of the atomic swaps and all this stuff. There's so much stuff that has happened in the last couple of years. It'll be interesting to see when the price goes back up and all of the volume starts and transactions really start to take off. What happens? It'll be interesting to see if some of these solutions did work.
I don't think if another bull run was to start today, that we would be much more prepared than we were back in December 2017, because the exchanges, and they are the major players in the game and the ones who pretty much influence transaction fees as they have the largest volumes every day, and they haven't really upgraded. They don't use Lightning. Some of them don't even use SegWit to take advantage of the block size increase. So it's very likely that we are going to see the same $50 fees and congestions and issues with validations in Bitcoin. But that's fine, I guess. It was never designed to be the next PayPal or the next Visa. It's all about having the kind of transactions that cannot be censored. That's much more valuable than having it for a low price. If you want to have it for a low price, you can use Litecoin, you can use even XRP, I guess.
I really think that you just nailed it. That's really where Litecoin comes in, and Bitcoin, those two work so well together. Yeah, hold your money in Bitcoin maybe. This is not financial advice, but if you want, have a little Litecoin too to do your transactions. I still think that there's a good chance that Litecoin will be the number 2 or number 3 for the long run, and it could be the one that we do payments in. So it could end up being the one that you like. It's been the cliche to say you buy your cup of coffee with, but it seems like it really could be.
So which stage, or what do you think is the ultimate sign that we have made it? Like we reach one point and you say, this is it, we have made it.
Yeah. I honestly think we made it. Like it's on the mainstream media is forced to report on it like every single day. That here in the United States, that's like one thing that like blows my mind. One point you couldn't find a rogue article. Only every couple of weeks in the beginning you could find something, and now you turn on CNBC. I don't have cable. I don't watch television, but I see the clips on YouTube and the compilations people put together, and it's all over the news. It's in the New York Times and all the Washington Post and stuff, and all the big newspapers in America are like forced to report on it. I know it just kills them every time they have to do it, but all of the obituaries that have been written and all of the negativity, and it's still here. I really think it's here, and I think we've hit that peak, and the next bull run will be like, I don't like to get into price predictions, but I could easily see 60, 65K on the next one. So once it hits again, every time it goes up, it's like a new wave of enthusiasm, a new wave of people come in that have never wanted to take the time to learn about it. So every time it goes up, it's like really just we're just getting bigger and bigger.
I'm really happy that we get to end this on a positive note and not get depressed. But as you said previously, you tend to be optimistic about your political views in terms of libertarianism and some kind of awakening that people are having right now by discovering the Austrian School of Economics and all these writers and economists who criticize the current system. So thank you very much, Mr. Bryer. This was insightful, and it was great to hear more about your background.
Vlad, I really appreciate you having me on, and it was an honor to be on your show. I really enjoy the work you're doing as well with your writing and your your podcast and videos.
Also, your writing. I guess maybe we can do some kind of special discount for people who listen to this podcast and can get your book, like 10% off.
Yeah, we could definitely work some. Yeah, we could try to work something out like that. And also, maybe if they wanted to pay in cryptocurrency, we could put my wallet in there, and then that would be the incentive to give some more of a discount, maybe.
Yeah, that can work. Also, I want to let you know that the system by which I run this is that I accept donations for the podcast, and 50% of everything I get for a specific show goes to the guest. So if anybody decides to donate for this particular episode, then you are going to get half of that donation.
Oh, I really appreciate that. Not necessary, but I definitely appreciate it. It's like I said, it's an honor to be on your show, and I respect what you're doing, and you're another strong force in the community. So I'd love to come back on again sometime.
No, I'm not sure if I'm a strong force. I'm not very well known. I'm not popular, but I try to do a good job with what I do. And I guess everyone should strive for this, to use their resources and their advantages to the best common goal that they can have to help the community and help themselves in the process.
That's what it's all about, helping everyone as you help yourself, and not using force and to gain your wealth, to do it voluntarily and actually provide some value to people.
Yeah, I'm happy that we discussed this. So thank you very much. And this was great.
Thanks a lot, Vlad. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
You too.